Welcome to Ida's video channel. In this video, I'll show you how to set the maximum polyline length to, let's say, 80 meters in my case, before I convert those polylines to a pipe network. I already processed these polylines, so if you look, for example, here, I have a vertex at the connecting polyline as well as here. This can be achieved with the map cleanup utility. And I will use this cleanup utility to set the maximum segment length. As you can see, there are multiple segments for each polyline, and if the segment is longer than 80 meters, I want to split it, and I want to split it into equal segments. How can I do that? First of all, I would like to display those segments that do have a length longer than 80 meters. I can use labels for that. Let me do that. I can either go to menu, lines and curves, add line curves labels, add line curves labels, or I can go to ribbon, annotate, add labels, line and curve, add line and curve labels. I want to label multiple segment, and as a label style, there is no length. So I will use a direction and I will make a copy. So I click on copy current selection, and as a name, I will use a length. I can use a pipe units in meters. Then I go to layout tab. There is a table tag, doesn't show any content, so let me add the table tag content. I will use a label tag number. Okay, but then I need to look at the other component. There is a direction arrow. I don't need to display that for now, so I will delete it. But I will add another component, which will be a text component. I will call it length. Length. And then as a content, I will use a segment length. So let me remove label text. And let's use general segment length, values in meters, 3 decimals up to millimeters. Okay. And then the text height, I will use a 2.5 millimeters. The rest I will keep as it is. I don't really mind about that. But what I want is that if the segment length is more than 80 meters, I want the text to be, let's say, 10 millimeters height. Let me click OK. And let me add these labels to the polylines. Unfortunately, you must click on each and every polyline, which is a bit annoying, but unfortunately there is no other option to do it automatically. And then I can close this. Now I want to set up the label in such a way that it must show the bigger text if the segment is longer than 80 meters. I go to Settings, General, Label Styles, Line, and there is the style which we created right now, and there are expressions. Expressions can be used for the labels. Right-click on an expression, go to New, and we can call it length text height. As an expression, I will use an if statement. So if the segment length, it's here, general segment length, is bigger than 80 meters, then, comma, I want the text to be 10 millimeters, which is 0.01 meters. Otherwise, I want the text to be 2.5 millimeters, which is in meters 0.0025. Close brackets. Okay. Then I go to length in meters. I go to edit. And I will change the length component, and as a text height, I will use length text height. Okay. And I can clearly see which segments are longer than 80 meters. And let me process those segments. Let me split them. So I go to IDAS, Quick Action, and I go to Map Cleanup, very useful tool. Then I will select the polylines. I can select all of them like this. Then I go to Next. And here is an option to use various cleanup actions. Most of the time we use like erase short objects, break crossing objects, extend undershoots and all that. But now I'm going to use weed polylines. And that might sound weird. I'm not going to weed them. I want to add additional segment. But this command allows both. You can weed the polyline, but you can also use a supplementing factor. So as a weeding factor, I will use a 0.1. So if the distance between the two vertices is shorter than 0.1 and the angle is smaller than 4 degrees, then it will weed it. Then supplementing factor, let's look at it. I go to Help, and I go to about weed polylines. So this is a weeding, but here is a supplementing factor. So you can specify the supplementing distance. And if the distance between the vertices is bigger than supplementing distance, then vertices are added in equal increments that are less or equal to supplementing distance. So let's do that. So for the supplementing distance, I want 80 meters. Bulge is used for the curved segment, so I'm not going to change this value. And let's finish. And nothing happened. 0 objects deleted, 0 created. Something is not right here. Let me show you this command again. I'm going to map clean up. I will select the entities again. Then I will go next. And here, under the supplementing factor, I believe Autodesk has error either in the code or in a help file. And at this point, we must use half the distance. So if you want the maximum distance to be 80 meters, you must halve it to 40 meters. Let me finish. Now it processed. It says it modified 2 segments. So let me select, because this is the longer segment and this is the other segment. And you can see all the text is smaller. It's 2.5 millimeters height. And the values 47.073, 47.073. So now I have an equal distance between the segments, and all the segments are shorter than 80 meters. And I'm ready to convert all these polylines to a pipe network. I will use the IDAS Super Wizard, for example. In this case, I specify the network name. I can call it Super if I want to. Surface, part list, I want to select all these polylines. And then I go next. I will specify the structure. I will use a manhole, maybe perfect, high spec center hole, 1050. Next, and I will use a pipe 600 millimeters. Next, if I want to, I can add a pipe label. I will use a name and 2D length, center to center. And then I click OK. So it creates the network for all the polylines. And if I zoom closer, all the pipes are shorter than 80 meters because there are structures here. And I can even go to Prospector, Pipe Network, Networks. I can select Super Network, Pipes, and I can highlight the pipes here in this view. Let me stretch it a bit. And I can either sort them by 2D length, center to center. That's probably the best. There's also an option to use 3D length, but that might be misleading if you have a very steep pipe. So as you can see, none of the pipes is longer than 80 meters.